Folks, there's so much going on today, and I got to say, having been here, when was it, Simon, was it like 2017 or something? 18. It was great then, but there's something happening among you. There's definitely much higher receptivity and readiness for this kind of thing, which is incredibly promising. And I feel this actually across your country, across Great Britain, somewhat also in Europe. And I think what the research is indicating that I think the European church has kind of hit the deck, the bottom rung, and the seeds that are in the ashes of that are beginning to sprout out. And it's very hopeful. It's very hopeful for us in Australia particularly, where we've not done that yet, and we haven't begun to grapple with the problematics of the system to the same degree. And it's a lot to do with our insecurity in often our denominations, and our leaders are somewhat insecure. And I think we need, our Pentecostals are our Americans, and they're doing all right. Because they got the, can-do about them. The Baptists are not doing well there, and they don't give for a lot of innovation, and stuck with the kind of church growth kind of model, and it's not working. More of the same doesn't get different results. So we've still got to hit bottom rung. But I think we might learn a lot from you guys, and it's just fantastic to see that here. I can go on so much on this, but let me go back a little bit here to say one of the disciplines I think in trying to resolve the problem of movement thinking is to think systems. It becomes absolutely incredibly useful to think like in terms of a living system of things. So everything's connected. We tend to be linear in our thinking, and then we go technique-based thing. I think what you're doing here is like trying to get a sense of how systems work together. Now, your body is a system as well, and there's about 10 subsystems in it. There's the neurological, the brain and nervous system, the cardiovascular, the kind of heart, the blood pumping things, the good stuff, right? Digestive, eliminative, and skin. What's the skin called again? It's got a name. Whatever it's called, right? But the reproductive, thank God, and all the rest of it. Now, all things are happening at once. And I think that's the first thing to know. And what that's good about it, if you go back to this image here, is that because this is a system, each part impacts the other part. And that's the good news is this, that, as long as you keep them all in mind, if you wanted to follow this kind of approach, each of these are high quality areas. If you improve this, it's excellent. It's going to make you a whole lot better, more like Jesus, if you do that well. But in itself, it's necessary but not sufficient. So to create movement, remember that's what we're looking at here. So disciple making is absolutely critical, but on its own, without the other things, if you didn't get your A test on, you're not going anywhere. Well, you don't have, because here's the intelligence of how you might organize and extend and all that. So it's all over here. But here's the good thing about a system is that if, let's say, we started over here, because it's a system, it impacts everything else. You get your APEST on, and all of a sudden you'll find that you'll organize differently. You're going to do incarnational mission differently. Mission is more the apostolic function. Go, incarnation, stay, go down deep, and be faithful. The combination creates the kind of, its foundations of movement are right there. You get your discipleship on, everything's touched by it. So that's the good thing. You don't have to do it all at once. But keep your eye on it. And that maybe you do we got a test actually, if you're interested, we can get that to you too. But assessments where you can actually have groups do assessment of where we're strong and weak. That gives you, don't go with your strength, friends. It's no good becoming good at what you're really good at. You need to look at your weaknesses and get better at them to become, because it's a system. It's no good if you've got a really good brain, but your heart isn't any good. It doesn't, because your brain can't do what your heart does. So just say that, just a discipline for you as leaders to think about. I think that's all I want to say there on that one. The other things more randomly, just responding to some of the stuff on the table. One of the things we're finding at the moment around the world is that the microchurch, and there's already a strong very impressive discussions around the tables. But the fact that you're even naming that is excellent. The microchurch movement now is becoming mature, and it's finally kind of becoming viable. We're seeing kind of movements established now that are literally young, but are beginning to scale across the city and beyond. We work with the two main ones at the moment is what we call Tampa Underground, which you'd know about. The fact that you'd probably know about it means it's already having movemental impact way beyond its area. They train hundreds, maybe thousands of leaders a year now in movement dynamics. And then the Kansas City Underground, is also stunningly good. And they're planting churches in just about every little zone of the city. And it's beginning to kind of multiply. And literally in kind of about 4 years now they've been going. They just started just before COVID. And they are now about 120 churches. They use hubs and all that. I contributed to a book on that called The Starfish and the Spirit. And that, by the way, in itself is a very powerful metaphor. If you don't know the idea of the starfish versus the spider kind of metaphor, is a very useful one. You know this, or anyone? Okay, so, now I've raised the question, you probably want others to say, what's he talking about? And I might explain that, because it's about your microchurch phenomenon. In the case of if you look at organization and you think of it in terms of a spider, now spiders can do things. I mean, Spider-Man and all that, they can do some pretty powerful stuff, right? And jumping, they're a pretty amazing creature. We've got a lot of them in our part of the world. But let's say in terms of an organization, think of it as a metaphor. If I took a leg off a spider, would it be able to operate? Probably. Okay, one leg off. Another leg off. It's getting a little tougher. Another leg off? Yeah, I don't think so, because they've got to catch kind of flies and whatever things that they do, and do a web and all that stuff. What if I took the head off a spider? Well, it's done, because its kind of intelligence is focused in the head. And this is a metaphor for organization, is if you've centralized, you're vulnerable at the head. Have you noticing that this now is a big issue right across the church? When the senior pastor does a kind of naughty thing, this damages everything, because it's vulnerable there. And the thing is, it's not easily reproducible. It can do things. I'm not saying it can't, and it serves good purpose. But the metaphor I think that we use for the microchurch much more so is that of a starfish. It's not a very good one. But let's say with a starfish, if you play the same thing, if I cut a leg off a starfish, what happens? It grows the leg back, and this one grows into a new starfish. Right, that's a starfish. If I cut it into 10 pieces or 12 pieces, I get 12 starfish. And I can tell you some funny stories, but it'll take too much time on this issue. But I would argue that because here's the challenge. Each part can reproduce the whole. Yeah. And so planning and building around starfish stuff is very, very important, to think differently about it, so that you don't want to create special departments and all that stuff, and then go hierarchical. Try your best to push towards each part has got the whole in it to be able to reproduce it. Not too complicated. Simplify it to multiply is another part of that whole deal. The other thing side of the microchurch movement is we say to adapt what we call a minimal ecclesiology. In business, you'd say minimal viable product. Having kind of a definition of the church that it's still a church, because a group of people is not necessarily just a church, It's just a group of people. So what actually has got to be added to it? We did this many years ago back in our church back in Melbourne, and we were proceeding to become more movemental as a result. But we had to work this up. And so instead of doing a formula, I'll do the one that we did with our church, because I think it's quite useful, and just suggest it to you. Is that so? We said, like, we're going to cook up a church, like a recipe. It's not formulas. So I'm going to ask you what you want to put in the recipe in the pot. I'm going to put two pieces in the pot, two things, because we've got them. The Bible, because it's there. No one has to find a Bible. You've got Bibles, And the Holy Spirit, because actually you're never going to come to a knowledge of God or even into the search without the prior work of the Holy Spirit in awakening that in us. So I'm assuming the Spirit's work in us, okay? So what do we need? First kind of recipe, part of the recipe ingredient, what do we need in our pot to be a church? Think essences, essential pieces. Yeah, one piece at a time. Yeah, yes, okay, you do need Jesus, but before even Jesus, that sounds silly. Okay, we can put, it's not a bad idea, Jesus. But that's not a church quite yet, because it's what's missing. People, right? So, so I would say people. So if you've got people, how many do you need? 2 more. You say 2 or 3 gather in my name, there you have trouble. But you also have the possibility of ecclesia. 2 or 3 people meeting in his name, not quite yet a church. Now, but what actually does happen, now I say Jesus, why I wanted to, reticent to say up front is because people often say God, but I say the difference between, the mosque down the road uses the word Allah. It's a generic word for God. Jews use Elohim, same idea. It's God, right? So just having God there it's not distinctive enough to make us yet a church. And so I say it's Christology, it's Jesus. And yes, you're going to come to knowledge of God through the Father. He's going to take you right there, right? I'm learning this again in my own life now. He's taking me to the Father. It's a whole new, just a beautiful journey at the moment. So, but when Jesus and people mix up together, there's all kinds of rich things begin to happen. Healed, saved, whole, forgiven, you share the benefits of Christ. But what actually happens to this group of people is they become bonded together. And I call this covenant community. And it's not just like a group of friends. It's not designer community. Actually, it's people that I don't necessarily choose. I'm your brother. Suck it up. You just have to work with that. And that's part of the richness of it, is that we have to learn to relate to other people. And I think that's really important. And if I change the equation quickly and I said, a true encounter with God and Jesus Christ results in, fill in the gap, results in. If Jesus walked into the room, what we're going to do? Worship. And worship, I want to argue, is not just singing songs to God. That is a powerful way of worship. But worship is offering my world back to God. It's a monotheistic idea of how we offer all dimensions of my life up to the one God. And it's a very rich idea. It's a very powerful concept. So it's offering to the Lordship kind of thing. But that's a big idea. So true encounter with God and Jesus Christ results in. Yes, I'm going to put baptism a little bit here, but play that out a little bit more. Transformation, and you can put transformation, and I think that's good. Discipleship, because we're going to follow, right? And that's the way we transform, so it's absolutely right, that's correct. A true encounter with God in Jesus Christ results in. Right, so, and that's, if you put the category up, mission, right? And that's part of what we do. Mission, of course, includes very much evangelism, but other things, justice issues as well. I would say if you stop there, you might want to add a few more, but that's a minimum ecclesiology. Do you need a building for this? No, but it could help. It can. I'm saying you need to meet somewhere, but it could be anywhere. How many people? We've already agreed it doesn't have to be that many. It could be 3,000. Any way to do this? Is any single way to do it? No, actually there's wonderfully diverse ways to do it. So if, let's say, you stopped over there as an example and said that's an ecclesia. So what we're looking for in training up micro-churches and getting them going is we're looking for those dimensions. And it's a metrics as well. So what you measure, it becomes something what you're able to see this demonstrated. Jesus is a little harder, but you know what I'm saying in the centrality of Christ. I would just simply say, allowing this to take place and seeing genuine expressions of ecclesia developed, and you've got disciples who then become leaders. You've got really the structure of something that can move and scale. And it's not so complicated you need 7 years of study. And it's 2 degrees in most. I don't know what the Baptists now believe, but you usually have to have a primary degree before you can do your theological degree. So it's 2 degrees. That's not Some of us should have that, there's no question. But to make it normative for this, anyone can do this. And the other thing I would simply say, focus on what we call the L50. The leader of 50 becomes absolutely critical. Finding those people, why is that the case? It's because they don't have to leave their jobs in order to do the ministry. And yet, you can train them in this. It's not 7 years, but there's some training. But there can be ongoing coaching and training in how to be a better leader. This is the scalable model. And here's one more thing I'll do, just as a suggestion with your L50s. L50 being key. So you begin to kind of create leadership system training that identifies people who can lead 50 people, up to 50 people. And what you do that on the basis of what we call 864 principle. This is the scalability. An example of it, okay? I'm not saying it's the only way to do it. But the L50 commits themselves to kind of disciple 8 people on a regular basis. The 8, if they're going to get that done with them, commit themselves to take upon themselves 6. And the 6 commit them to take 4. So it makes it a little easier along the scale. Now, I don't know my maths, but it's a little over 200 people are covered by that. One L50, in a sense, can actually end up having kind of like about 200 plus people in discipleship groups. So just thinking scalability like that becomes really important. And here's the other thing I would simply say on this. Don't leave the content. In other words, develop tools and resources and ideas that become consistent throughout. In the case of like in this context, you had 3DM's kind of material. I think what they were very clever in doing is having 8 key ideas that then could, they can leverage that. I don't know if you know 3DM, but they're tools, what they call life shapes. And that was consistent throughout, so it wasn't left to chance. Otherwise, it's Chinese whispers down here. You won't know over here what was said over there. So be in charge of that process. But then building scalability and then just having something that is minimal ecclesiology that can build into something much bigger and better. So anyway, just some ideas as you go and thinking through things. Yeah.